The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into my parents' circular driveway. The sound somehow different today. Maybe it was because I knew what was coming. The annual Henderson family barbecue, where success was measured in horsepower and brand names, where conversations always seemed to drift toward who drove what, who lived where, and who married whom. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I sat for a moment in my car, watching through the windshield as my cousin Derek polished the chrome on his brand new Porsche 911. The afternoon sun caught the metallic paint, sending brilliant reflections across the manicured lawn where my mother had spent 3 days preparing the perfect backdrop for today's gathering. Everything had to look just right for the neighbors to see, for the family photos that would inevitably end up on social media with captions about blessed family time. My phone buzzed against the leather seat. A text from Marcus, my husband of 2 years. "Hope the family gathering goes well, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about. Take the prototype back to the facility by 8 p.m. sharp. Love you." I smiled, running my finger over the screen before tucking the phone into my purse. Marcus worked long hours, and his company was in the middle of several confidential projects that kept him traveling between California and Texas. The nature of his work meant I often attended family events alone, which suited me fine. It gave me space to breathe, to be myself without the weight of expectations that came with being married to someone in his position. The front door of my childhood home opened, and my sister-in-law Jennifer emerged, her heels clicking against the stone steps. She was always the first to greet arrivals, not out of warmth, but to get the first look at what everyone was wearing, driving, carrying. Information was currency in our family, and Jennifer was the central bank. "Maya!" she called out, waving enthusiastically. "You made it! We were starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost or if that little car of yours had broken down somewhere." I stepped out, smoothing down my simple sundress. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention to price tags or designer labels. I'd learned over the years that blending in was easier than standing out in this crowd. "Traffic was lighter than expected," I replied, grabbing my contribution to the potluck, a homemade pasta salad that had taken me 3 hours to perfect. Jennifer's eyes immediately went to my car, and I watched her expression shift from polite interest to barely concealed disappointment. "Oh," she said, her voice dropping half an octave. "Is that new?" "It's been reliable," I answered diplomatically, locking the doors with the key fob. The car's response was so quiet that Jennifer probably didn't even notice the subtle electronic sounds, the way the mirrors adjusted themselves and the soft glow that emanated from the door handles. "Well, reliability is important," she said, though her tone suggested she found reliability about as exciting as watching paint dry. "Derek just picked up his Porsche last week. Have you seen it? The dealer said it's the same model that celebrities drive in Hollywood." We walked toward the backyard together, and I could already hear the familiar sounds of a Henderson gathering in full swing. My father's booming laugh carried over the fence, punctuated by the clink of beer bottles and the sizzle of meat on the grill. The smell of barbecue sauce mixed with my mother's signature potato salad and the faint scent of chlorine from the pool where my teenage nephew was probably showing off his diving skills to anyone who would watch. "Maya's here," Jennifer announced as we rounded the corner, and suddenly I was the center of attention in the way I always dreaded. Not because anyone was genuinely excited to see me, but because my arrival marked the completion of the guest list, which meant the real business of the afternoon could begin. The subtle competitions, the veiled comparisons, the carefully orchestrated conversations designed to establish everyone's place in the family hierarchy. My mother, Patricia Henderson Wells, looked up from the elaborate appetizer spread she was arranging. At 58, she still moved with the confidence of someone who had spent decades as the social coordinator of our suburban neighborhood. Every event she hosted was a production, every detail planned to reflect well on the family name. "Sweetheart, you look lovely," she said, though I caught her glance flicking toward the driveway. "Where did you park?" "In the driveway, next to Derek's car." "Oh." The single word carried the weight of disappointment, as if my parking choice had somehow disrupted her master plan for the afternoon's aesthetics. "Well, we're just glad you could make it. Marcus couldn't join us again?" "He's working," I said simply. It was true, though the full truth was more complicated. Marcus had offered to come, had even rearranged meetings to make it possible, but I had encouraged him to focus on his projects. These family gatherings were easier to navigate when I didn't have to worry about fielding questions about his work, his travel schedule, or the mysterious nature of the company he ran. My Uncle Bill approached, a beer in one hand and a serving fork in the other. He was the self-appointed patriarch of our extended family since my grandfather's passing, a role he embraced with the enthusiasm of someone who finally had a captive audience for his opinions. "Maya, good to see you, kiddo. How's married life treating you?" "Really well, thank you." "And Marcus, still doing that computer thing?" I nodded, used to the way my family simplified complex careers into digestible categories. Marcus's company developed cutting-edge automotive technology, but to my family, anything involving computers fell into the vague category of that computer thing. "Well, as long as it pays the bills, right?" Uncle Bill chuckled, taking a swig of his beer. "Speaking of which, I noticed you've got a new set of wheels out there. Very practical looking." The word practical hung in the air like a backhanded compliment. In Henderson family vocabulary, practical was code for boring, cheap, or uninspiring. It was the word they used when they couldn't think of anything genuinely positive to say, but felt obligated to acknowledge someone's choices. My cousin Derek appeared at his father's shoulder, wiping his hands on a rag that probably cost more than most people's car payments. "Yeah, I saw it when you pulled in. What is it exactly? Some kind of economy model?" "It's a Tesla," I replied, setting my pasta salad on the designated potluck table. "Oh, Tesla!" My Aunt Karen joined the growing circle around me. "Those are supposed to be environmentally friendly, right? Very responsible of you, dear. Though I have to say, I've heard they're quite expensive to maintain. All those computer parts." I smiled politely, not bothering to correct her misconceptions. The truth was far more complicated than anything they would believe, and attempting explanations would only invite more questions I wasn't prepared to answer. "The thing about electric cars," Derek continued, warming to his favorite topic, "is that they're fine for city driving, but they don't have the power or range for real road trips. That's why I stick with German engineering. There's something to be said for traditional craftsmanship." My younger cousin Ashley, fresh out of college and working at a marketing firm, nodded sagely as if Derek's automotive wisdom was being passed down through generations. "Plus, don't you have to charge them all the time? That seems so inconvenient. What if you're somewhere without charging stations?" "The infrastructure is improving," I offered mildly. "Sure, but it's still limiting," Derek pressed on. "I mean, no offense, but I can't imagine choosing an electric car over something with real performance. The Porsche goes from 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. It's pure adrenaline." Uncle Bill raised his beer in salute to his son's automotive choice. "Now that's a real car. Something with personality, with presence. When you pull up somewhere in a vehicle like that, people notice. It makes a statement." "What kind of statement does my car make?" I asked, genuinely curious about their perception. The question caught them off guard. They exchanged glances, and I could see them trying to find a diplomatic way to express their honest opinions without crossing the line into outright rudeness. "Well," Jennifer said carefully, "it says you're sensible, environmentally conscious, budget-minded." Ashley nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. It's very responsible, very mature." In Henderson family speak, mature was another polite way of saying boring. I was 26 years old, and they were describing my choices as if I'd already settled into middle-aged practicality.
My father joined our little automotive symposium, flipping a burger with the kind of precision that suggested years of backyard barbecue mastery. You know, Maya, there's nothing wrong with starting small and working your way up. Your mother and I drove practical cars when we were first married. Once you and Marcus get more established, you'll probably want something with more presence. The assumption that my car choice was based on financial limitations rather than personal preference was so ingrained in their thinking that they couldn't imagine any other explanation. In their minds, everyone aspired to the same status symbols they valued. The idea that someone might choose differently, might have access to things they didn't understand, was simply outside their realm of possibility. Have you considered a lease? Derek suggested helpfully. Sometimes you can get into a luxury vehicle for less than you'd think. The payments might surprise you. I'm happy with what I have, I said simply. For now, Uncle Bill added with a knowing wink. But mark my words, once you get behind the wheel of something with real power, you'll understand what you've been missing. The conversation gradually shifted to other topics. Derek's promotion at the insurance company, Ashley's new apartment, Jennifer's latest home renovation project. But I noticed how they kept glancing toward the driveway, how the discussion kept circling back to cars, success, and the visible markers of achievement that seemed to define their understanding of a life well lived. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself observing rather than fully participating. There was a rhythm to these gatherings that had remained unchanged since my childhood. The same personalities playing the same roles. The same hierarchies reinforcing themselves through countless small interactions. Derek as the successful heir apparent, Ashley as the promising newcomer, Jennifer as the social coordinator, my parents as the established pillars of respectability. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off.
And me? I had always been the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who made safe choices and avoided drawing attention to herself. Today, that perception felt more pronounced than ever, crystallized around their reaction to my car. What they didn't know, what none of them could have guessed, was that the vehicle sitting in their driveway represented technology so advanced, so exclusive, that fewer than a dozen existed in the entire world. What they saw as a basic electric car was actually a prototype worth more than all their vehicles combined, equipped with features that wouldn't be available to the public for years. But perhaps more importantly, what they didn't understand was the life I had built away from these family gatherings, the world I inhabited with Marcus, where innovation mattered more than tradition, where the most impressive achievements often happened behind closed doors, where true success was measured not in public displays, but in the quiet satisfaction of pushing boundaries and solving impossible problems. As my mother called everyone to fill their plates, I helped carry dishes from the kitchen to the outdoor serving area. Through the window, I caught another glimpse of my car, sitting quietly in the driveway next to Derek's gleaming Porsche. To anyone passing by, it would look like exactly what my family believed it to be. A sensible, unremarkable choice made by someone with limited options. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so telling about the assumptions we make based on surface appearances, about the stories we tell ourselves about other people's lives, about the way we measure worth and success. But for now, I was content to let them maintain their illusions. The truth had a way of revealing itself when the time was right, and something told me that moment might come sooner than any of us expected. Dinner was served on my mother's best china, the kind that came out only for special occasions and required hand-washing afterward. The long wooden table that had hosted countless family meals groaned under the weight of serving platters, each dish positioned with the precision of a magazine photo shoot. Derek had claimed the seat at the head of the table, opposite my father, establishing himself as the evening's unofficial master of ceremonies. The conversation flowed like wine, smooth at first, then gaining potency as the evening progressed. Ashley regaled us with stories from her marketing job, each anecdote carefully crafted to highlight her creativity and ambition. Jennifer discussed her latest real estate ventures, dropping property values and neighborhood names with the casual confidence of someone who understood that money talk was acceptable as long as it was wrapped in concern for market trends and investment opportunities. You know, Derek said, cutting into his perfectly grilled steak, I was talking to my financial advisor last week about diversifying my portfolio. He mentioned that the luxury car market has been incredibly strong. Classic Porsches, especially, are appreciating faster than most traditional investments. Uncle Bill nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. A good car isn't just transportation, it's an asset. Something that holds its value, makes a statement about your success. Speaking of which, Ashley chimed in, Maya, what kind of resale value do electric cars have? I've heard they depreciate pretty quickly because the technology changes so fast. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the familiar weight of being the family's token example of practical, if uninspiring, decision-making. I haven't really looked into it, I replied honestly. I'm not planning to sell anytime soon. Well, you should keep an eye on it, Derek advised, with the authority of someone who had bought exactly one luxury car in his lifetime. The thing about electric vehicles is that they're still experimental. Today's model could be completely obsolete in a few years when they figure out the technology properly. My father leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, ready to dispense paternal wisdom. You know, when my mother and I were starting out, we made the mistake of buying practical instead of thinking long-term. Our first car was this little economy thing, reliable, good gas mileage, everything the salesman said we needed. But we outgrew it so quickly, ended up trading it in for a loss just 2 years later. The important thing is to buy something you can grow into, something that reflects your aspirations, not just your current situation. Jennifer reached for the wine bottle, refilling her glass with practiced elegance. That's such good advice. When David and I bought our BMW, everyone said we were being too ambitious, but it was an investment in our image, in our professional success. People notice what you drive. It affects how they perceive you. Absolutely, Derek agreed enthusiastically. Image matters in business. When I pull up to a client meeting in the Porsche, it immediately establishes credibility. They know they're dealing with someone successful, someone who understands quality. Ashley nodded vigorously, as if absorbing crucial life lessons. That makes so much sense. It's like personal branding, right? Everything you do sends a message about who you are. The conversation continued to spiral around the same themes: success, image, the importance of making the right impressions. I listened with growing fascination at how confident they all seemed about their understanding of how the world worked, how certain they were that their values and priorities were universal truths. Maya, Uncle Bill said, suddenly, his voice carrying the tone he used when delivering what he considered important life advice. I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but have you and Marcus considered upgrading? I mean, now that you're married, now that you're building a life together, it might be time to think about presenting yourselves as a team, a successful team. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the table, I could see varying degrees of agreement in their expressions. They weren't being malicious. In their minds, they were offering genuine guidance to a family member who clearly needed help understanding the importance of social positioning.
Marcus and I are comfortable with our choices, I said carefully. Of course you are, Jennifer said quickly, the kind of hasty reassurance that preceded a but. But comfort and success aren't always the same thing. Sometimes you have to invest in your image before you can afford it, you know? Fake it till you make it. Derek leaned forward, warming to the topic. Exactly. When I was first starting at the insurance company, I couldn't really afford the Porsche. But I knew that driving something impressive would help me close bigger deals and would help me fit in with the successful agents. It paid for itself within 6 months. That's brilliant, Ashley said admiringly. It's like spending money to make money. My mother cleared her throat delicately, the way she did when she was about to offer guidance she considered particularly important. Sweetheart, we're only saying this because we care about you. You're so bright, so capable, but sometimes I worry that you're not advocating for yourself, not putting your best foot forward. In what way? I asked, genuinely curious about her perception. Well, she hesitated, glancing around the table for support. You've always been so focused on being practical, on being responsible. But there's nothing wrong with wanting nice things, with enjoying the fruits of your labor. You and Marcus work hard. You deserve to show it. Uncle Bill nodded sagely. Your mother's right. There's a difference between being humble and being invisible.
Success should be celebrated, displayed. It inspires others, shows them what's possible. The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with my mother's good silver. Here they were lecturing me about the importance of displaying success, completely unaware that the quiet car in their driveway represented access to technology and resources they couldn't begin to imagine. Besides, what does Marcus drive? I don't think I've ever seen his car. He has a company vehicle, which was technically true. Marcus had several vehicles at his disposal through the company, though describing them as simply company cars was like calling the Pentagon government office space. Company car? Derek's eyebrows rose with interest. What kind of company provides cars? That could be a good sign. It means they value their employees, want to project the right image. Jennifer leaned forward conspiratorially. What kind of car is it? Something nice, I hope. It reflects on you too, you know. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down discreetly, expecting another update from Marcus about his work schedule. Instead, I saw a message that made my stomach drop. Emergency at the facility. Need the prototype back immediately. James is on his way to you now. Don't let anyone else drive it. Critical security issue. We'll explain later. I read the message twice, my mind racing. James was Marcus's head of security, a former Secret Service agent who handled the most sensitive aspects of the company's operations. If he was coming personally, if there was a security issue involving the prototype, this was serious. Everything okay? My mother asked, noticing my changed expression. Just work, I said, tucking the phone away. I might need to leave earlier than planned. On a Saturday? What kind of job requires weekend emergencies? Before I could respond, Ashley's phone rang loudly, causing everyone to jump slightly. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Sorry, I should take this. It's my roommate, and she only calls when something's wrong. She stepped away from the table, and we could hear her voice rising in concern from the living room. What do you mean someone's asking about Maya's car? What kind of questions? The table fell silent. We could hear Ashley's side of the conversation clearly through the open doorway. Slow down, Christina. Someone was asking about what? A white Tesla? Who was asking? A man in a suit? He said he was with what company? Did you tell him anything? Okay, good. Don't talk to anyone else about it, okay? I'll call you back. Ashley returned to the table, her face pale and confused. Maya, that was really weird. My roommate Christina was at the coffee shop on 5th Street, and some guy in a suit was asking the barista about a white Tesla that's been parked at various locations around town. He showed her a picture, and she recognized it as your car because she's seen you pick me up in it before. The room erupted in confused murmurs, but I felt a cold certainty settling in my chest. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was tracking the prototype, and now my family was inadvertently involved. Derek straightened in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to something approaching alarm. What kind of man in a suit asks around about someone's car? That sounds like police? Or worse. Maybe it's insurance-related, Jennifer suggested hopefully. Sometimes they investigate claims by checking where vehicles have been seen.
Uncle Bill's expression had grown serious. Maya, is there something you need to tell us? Are you and Marcus involved in something complicated? The weight of their stares felt heavier than usual, charged with a new kind of tension. These weren't their typical family inquiries about my life choices. These were questions tinged with worry, suspicion, and the dawning realization that perhaps my quiet, practical existence wasn't as simple as they'd assumed. I don't know what that was about, I said honestly, but I should probably head home soon and figure out what's going on. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand, her expression shifting from mild concern to genuine worry. Sweetheart, if you're in some kind of trouble, we need to know. We're family. We help each other. Before I could respond, the unmistakable sound of a powerful engine pulled into the driveway. Not the smooth purr of a luxury car, but something deeper, more substantial.
Through the dining room window, I could see the distinctive silhouette of a black SUV with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that immediately communicated official business and serious purpose. Derek pushed back from the table, moving toward the window with the instinctive curiosity that overcomes people when unusual events unfold in familiar settings. Who the hell is that? The SUV's engine shut off, and in the sudden silence, we could hear the decisive sound of car doors closing. Not one door, but multiple doors, multiple people. Maya, my father said quietly, his voice carrying a gravity I hadn't heard since childhood. What exactly is going on here? Through the window, I could see two figures approaching the front door. One was James, easily recognizable despite the formal business suit that replaced his usual casual attire. The other was a woman I didn't recognize, also dressed in dark professional clothing, moving with the kind of purposeful efficiency that suggested law enforcement or corporate security. Ashley grabbed my arm, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Maya, these people look serious, like federal agents serious. What kind of car are you driving? The doorbell rang, a sound that seemed to echo through the house with unusual resonance. My mother looked toward the front door, then back at me, her expression cycling between concern, confusion, and something that might have been fear. I think I'm about to find out exactly what kind of car I've been driving. The words hung in the air as footsteps approached the front door. Around the table, my family members exchanged glances that ranged from bewildered to alarmed. The comfortable family dynamic we had maintained for years was shifting, the ground beneath our assumptions beginning to crack. And in that moment, as the doorbell rang again with more insistence, I realized that the careful boundaries I had maintained between my two worlds, the quiet family gatherings and the high-stakes reality of Marcus's work, were about to collapse entirely. The simple family barbecue that had begun with gentle mockery of my practical car choice was about to become something none of us had bargained for. The doorbell's third ring cut through the dining room like a blade. My father rose from his chair with the deliberate movements of a man who had spent 40 years handling unexpected situations in his career as a high school principal. Even in retirement, he maintained the authoritative presence that had once commanded respect from teenagers and parents alike. "I'll get it," he announced, though his voice carried an edge I rarely heard. "Dad, wait," I said quickly, standing. "I should handle this." The room fell silent, except for the soft clink of Jennifer setting down her wine glass with unusual care. Everyone was watching me now, their expressions ranging from concern to suspicion to barely contained curiosity. The comfortable family dynamic we had maintained for years was shifting, the ground beneath our assumptions beginning to crack. James's voice carried through the front door, professional and calm. "Good evening. I'm looking for Maya Richardson. I believe she's a guest here this evening." My father glanced back at me, his eyebrows raised in a silent question. The use of my married name seemed to surprise him. My family still thought of me as Maya Henderson, the quiet daughter who had made a simple life for herself with a man who worked in computers. "That's me," I called out, moving toward the front door. "It's okay, Dad. I know him." But Uncle Bill was already standing, his protective instincts overriding family hierarchies. "Maya, you don't answer the door for strangers who show up asking for you by name. That's not how this works." Derek moved to the window again, peering through the curtains with the intensity of someone watching a crime drama unfold in his own neighborhood. "There are two of them, professional looking. The SUV has government plates." "Government plates?" Ashley's voice climbed an octave. "Moya, what is going on?" Before I could answer, my father opened the front door with the measured caution of someone who had dealt with difficult parents during parent-teacher conferences for decades. James stood on the threshold, his presence somehow managing to be both reassuring and imposing simultaneously. "Mr. Henderson, I apologize for interrupting your family gathering. I'm James Mitchell, head of security for Apex Innovations. I need to speak with Mrs. Richardson about a company vehicle she's been driving." Company vehicle. The words hit the dining room like a small explosion. I could hear chairs scraping against the floor as the rest of my family moved closer to hear the conversation. "Company vehicle?" my father repeated, his principal voice emerging, the tone he used when students tried to explain away obvious inconsistencies in their stories.
The woman standing beside James stepped forward slightly. Mr. Henderson, I'm Agent Sarah Chen with the Department of Transportation's Special Investigations Unit. We're conducting a routine security check on an experimental vehicle that's been flagged in our monitoring systems. Department of Transportation, Special Investigations Unit? The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implications none of us were prepared to process. Jennifer appeared at my father's shoulder, her real estate agent instincts activated by the presence of official business. Experimental vehicle? What kind of experimental vehicle? Agent Chen consulted a tablet she was carrying, her movements precise and practiced. Mrs. Richardson, you're currently in possession of a prototype electric vehicle, designation EV-X1, which is registered to Apex Innovations under special federal licensing. We need to conduct an immediate security assessment. From behind me, I heard Derek's sharp intake of breath. Prototype? Maya, what the hell kind of car are you driving? James's eyes found mine over my father's shoulder, and I could see the urgency there despite his calm demeanor. Mrs. Richardson, there's been a security breach at one of our facilities. We need to secure all prototype vehicles immediately. No one else should have access to or information about the vehicle you're driving. The dining room had gone completely silent. I could feel the weight of 7 pairs of eyes staring at me, processing this information at different speeds. Ashley looked confused. Jennifer looked calculating. Derek looked stunned. And my parents looked like they were trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Maya, my mother said slowly, what company does Marcus actually work for? Before I could answer, Uncle Bill stepped forward, his protective instincts now fully engaged. Hold on just a minute. Nobody's taking anything from my niece without proper documentation. Let's see some identification. Agent Chen reached into her jacket with practiced efficiency, producing a badge and credentials that she handed to my father. James followed suit, his identification indicating a security clearance level that made Derek whistle softly under his breath. Apex Innovations, Advanced Automotive Technology Division. He looked up at me, his expression shifting from confusion to something approaching awe. Maya, this says they develop prototype vehicles for the Department of Defense. The words settled over the room like a revelation. Department of Defense. Military contracts. Suddenly, my practical car choice was being reframed in terms that commanded respect rather than gentle mockery. Jennifer recovered first, her voice tight with disbelief. Maya, are you telling us that your husband works for a defense contractor? That the car you've been driving is some kind of military prototype? It's complicated, which was the understatement of the century. Agent Chen stepped into the conversation with professional efficiency. Mrs. Richardson, we need to examine the vehicle immediately. There are specific security protocols we need to follow. Derek moved away from the window, his expression cycling between embarrassment and fascination. When you said it was a Tesla, you meant it was actually a Tesla prototype? Like one that hasn't been released to the public? Not exactly Tesla, James clarified, though he kept his explanation deliberately vague. Apex Innovations develops next-generation electric vehicle technology for multiple applications. The vehicle Mrs. Richardson has been driving contains proprietary systems that are several years ahead of current commercial technology. Several years ahead. The implications of that phrase seemed to hit everyone simultaneously. Ashley sank into the nearest chair, her hand pressed to her forehead. Oh my God, Maya, we've been giving you advice about resale value on a car that doesn't even exist in the regular market. Uncle Bill was studying the credentials with the thoroughness of someone who understood that official documentation mattered. These look legitimate, but I want to understand what's happening here. Maya, are you in any danger? The question hung heavy in the air. Agent Chen exchanged a glance with James before responding carefully. We don't believe Mrs. Richardson is in any personal danger, but the vehicle contains sensitive technology that requires immediate security assessment. What kind of sensitive technology?
asked Derek, his insurance agent background making him instinctively probe for details. I'm not authorized to discuss specific capabilities, but I can tell you that the vehicle contains advanced navigation systems, communication arrays, and propulsion technology that is currently classified. Classified. The word sent a ripple of stunned silence through the room. My family was beginning to understand that their gentle mockery of my cheap electric car had been wildly off target. Jennifer was the first to fully grasp the implications. Maya, if this car is classified military technology, what does that make Marcus? What does that make you? Before I could answer, James's radio crackled to life. A voice came through, professional but urgent. Control to Mitchell, we have confirmation of the security breach. Unknown parties have been conducting surveillance on multiple prototype locations. We need immediate asset recovery.
Asset recovery. My car wasn't just a prototype. It was an asset valuable enough to warrant federal security protocols. My father handed the credentials back to Agent Chen, his expression grave. Gentlemen, ma'am, what do you need from us? We need to examine the vehicle and ensure its security systems haven't been compromised, James explained. We also need to verify that no unauthorized persons have had access to it. Derek looked stricken. When I was polishing my car earlier, I walked around Maya's. I looked through the windows. Did I compromise something? Agent Chen consulted her tablet again. Can you describe exactly what you observed? Nothing really. The interior looked normal, clean. There was some kind of screen on the dashboard, but I assumed it was just a regular touch screen like most cars have now. What size screen? James asked, his question carrying more weight than Derek seemed to understand. I don't know. Bigger than normal, I guess. Maybe twice the size of what's in my Porsche? James and Agent Chen exchanged another look. The screen Derek was describing was apparently significant enough to warrant concern. Ashley stood up abruptly. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. When you've picked me up from work, when we've gone to lunch, when you've driven me places, have I been riding in a classified military vehicle? The question seems to crystallize something for everyone in the room. This wasn't just about a fancy car or advanced technology. This was about the realization that Maya, quite practical Maya, had been living a completely different life than any of them had imagined. It's not a military vehicle, exactly, I said carefully. It's more like a test platform for future automotive technology. Future automotive technology that requires federal security clearance, my mother said slowly, her teacher's instincts for uncovering the truth beneath incomplete explanations coming to the surface. Agent Chen stepped forward again. Mrs. Richardson, we need to secure the vehicle now. We'll also need to conduct brief interviews with everyone who has seen or been near it today. Interviews? Jennifer's voice carried a note of alarm. Are we in trouble for something? No, James assured her, but we need to document any potential security exposures. It's standard protocol. Uncle Bill crossed his arms, his protective stance returning. And if we refuse to be interviewed? Agent Chen's expression remained professionally neutral. Sir, this is a matter of national security. Cooperation is an optional. National security. The phrase settled over the Henderson family barbecue like a shroud, transforming what had been a normal family gathering into something none of them had ever experienced. Derek sank into a chair, his face pale. Maya, when I was polishing my car earlier, I walked around Maya's. I looked through the windows. Did I compromise something? I looked around the room at my family's faces, seeing years of assumptions crumbling in real time. The quiet, practical niece they thought they understood had been hiding in plain sight, her modest demeanor concealing access to technology and resources that existed at the highest levels of innovation and security. The car's value isn't really the point, I said softly. Then what is the point? My father asked, his voice carrying the weight of a man trying to understand how he had so completely misunderstood his daughter's life. Before I could answer, Agent Chen's radio crackled again. All units, we have visual confirmation of unauthorized surveillance at the Henderson residence. Recommend immediate asset extraction. James's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket. Mrs. Richardson, we need to move now. The words unauthorized surveillance cut through the dining room like a physical force. James was already moving toward the window, his trained eyes scanning the street with the kind of systematic precision that comes from years of protective detail work. Agent Chen spoke into her radio with clipped efficiency.
coordinating something that was clearly beyond a routine security check. "Everyone stay away from the windows," James instructed, his voice carrying new authority. "Mrs. Richardson, I need the vehicle keys now." I reached into my purse, my hands steadier than I expected given the circumstances. As I handed over the key fob, Derek stared at it with the intensity of someone seeing an alien artifact. He is right. The key fob was sleek black metal with no visible buttons, no brand logos, just a smooth surface that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It looked more like a piece of sophisticated electronics than traditional automotive hardware. Agent Chen was coordinating through her earpiece while simultaneously typing on her tablet. Perimeter team reports 2 vehicles conducting surveillance from adjacent streets. Occupants unknown, but they've been maintaining observation for approximately 40 minutes. 40 minutes. My family had been under surveillance for nearly the entire time we'd been discussing my car, their innocent mockery and advice taking place while unknown parties watched from the shadows. My mother moved closer to me, her protective instincts overriding her confusion. "Maya, sweetheart, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you and Marcus involved in something dangerous?" Before I could answer, Agent Chen's radio crackled with an urgent update. "Controlled to field team, we have positive identification on one of the surveillance vehicles, registered to Chen Industries, a known corporate espionage operation. This is not a friendly interest."
Corporate espionage. The phrase sent a chill through the room that had nothing to do with the evening temperature. Uncle Bill positioned himself between the family and the windows, his protective stance instinctive despite having no real understanding of what we might be protecting ourselves from. "Maya," Jennifer said, her voice tight with realization, "exactly what kind of technology is in that car?" Agent Chen looked up from her tablet, her expression grave. "The vehicle contains next-generation autonomous navigation systems, advanced materials that won't be commercially available for at least 5 years, and communication arrays that operate on classified frequencies." Derek's face had gone pale. "When I was looking at it earlier, when I walked around it, did I see classified technology?" "The exterior appears conventional by design," James explained while continuing to monitor the street. "But even the paint contains proprietary compounds that affect radar signatures. The wheels use experimental materials. The charging system operates on frequencies that don't exist in commercial applications." Ashley stood up abruptly, pressing her hands to her temples. "Oh my God! Maya, every time I've been in that car, every time you've driven me anywhere, I've been inside classified military technology?" "Not military, exactly," I said, though the distinction felt increasingly meaningless given the federal response surrounding us. Agent Chen's radio crackled again. "Field team, we have movement from surveillance vehicles. They're repositioning for closer observation. Recommend immediate extraction." James moved with decisive efficiency, speaking into his own communications device. "Control, we need a secure transport team at this location immediately. Full escort protocol." "Secure transport?" my father asked, his principled voice emerging even in these extraordinary circumstances. "Where exactly is my daughter going?" "To a secure facility where we can properly assess any security compromises," Agent Chen replied. "It's standard protocol when civilian assets are involved in potential security breaches." Civilian assets. The phrase hung in the air like a revelation. My family was beginning to understand that I wasn't just Maya, who had made a practical car choice. I was someone with access to technology that warranted federal protection. Uncle Bill stepped forward, his protective instincts fully engaged. "Nobody's taking my niece anywhere without a full explanation of what's happening and where she's going." James paused in his security preparations, recognizing the legitimate concern of a family member. "Sir, your niece has been driving a prototyped vehicle worth approximately $12 million, containing technology that represents several years of advanced research. Unknown parties have been conducting surveillance, which suggests possible attempts at technology theft or worse." $12 million. The number hit the room like a physical blow. Derek made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a groan, his face cycling through expressions of shock, embarrassment, and
something approaching awe. 12 million? Jennifer whispered. Maya, you've been driving a $12 million car to family barbecues? Well, we gave you advice about resale value, Ashley added, her voice hollow with mortification. My mother sank into the nearest chair, her hand pressed to her chest. Maya, when you said Marcus worked in computers, you didn't mean he was a programmer, did you? Before I could answer, the sound of multiple vehicles pulling into the street reached us through the windows. James moved to the edge of the curtain, peering out with professional caution. Secured transport has arrived. Mrs. Richardson, we need to move now. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see 3 black SUVs positioning themselves with military precision. The lead vehicle had pulled directly behind my prototype, while the other 2 took positions that effectively controlled the street. Men in dark suits emerged from each vehicle, their movements coordinated and purposeful. This looks like something from a movie, Derek said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. Agent Chen was packing her equipment with efficient speed. Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Henderson, we'll need you and your family to remain indoors for the next hour while we complete the extraction, for your own safety. Extraction, my father repeated. You're talking about my daughter like she's some kind of intelligence asset. James paused in his preparations, meeting my father's eyes directly. Sir, your daughter has had access to technology that several foreign governments would pay millions to examine. Her safety is our primary concern, but we also need to ensure that no classified information has been compromised. The weight of that statement settled over my family like a heavy blanket. They were beginning to understand that my quiet, practical life had been anything but simple. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and I could see James nod his approval before I answered. Maya? Marcus's voice carried a strain I rarely heard. Are you safe? James should be there by now. I'm here, I said, putting the phone on speaker so the officials could hear. What's happening? Someone breached our Chicago facility 2 hours ago. They didn't take anything, but they accessed files related to the prototype program. We have to assume they know about every vehicle in the field, including yours. The room fell silent except for the sound of my family's collective intake of breath. A facility breach, files accessed. The casual surveillance of my car was connected to something much larger and more serious.
Marcus, my father said, stepping closer to the phone. This is Dan Henderson, Maya's father. I think it's time you explained exactly what kind of work you do. There was a brief pause before Marcus replied, his voice careful but honest. Mr. Henderson, I'm the CEO of Apex Innovations. We develop advanced transportation technologies for government and commercial applications. The vehicle Maya has been driving represents about 3 years of research and development. CEO. The word hit my family like another revelation. Their quiet son-in-law, who worked in computers, was the chief executive officer of a company significant enough to warrant federal security protocols. Jennifer looked at me with an expression of complete bewilderment. Maya, your husband is the CEO of a defense contractor, and you've been living like a normal person? We are normal people, I said, though even as I spoke the words, I could hear how hollow they sounded, given the federal agents coordinating a security extraction in my parents' living room. Agent Chen approached me with a secure tablet. Mrs. Richardson, I need you to review and sign this non-disclosure agreement. It covers everything that's happened here tonight and ensures the protection of classified information. Non-disclosure agreement. Classified information? My family watched as I signed documents that officially recognized my involvement in something far beyond their understanding. Derek stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. Maya, when I was telling you about the importance of driving something that makes a statement, you were already driving something that makes a statement to the federal government. And when we were discussing resale value, Ashley added, her voice still hollow with shock, you were driving something that literally doesn't have a commercial market because it won't exist for years. Uncle Bill shook his head slowly. Maya, when you said you were happy with your car, you meant you were happy driving around in classified military technology?
It's not military, I started to say, but James interrupted. Sir, while the technology has civilian applications, the research is funded through defense contracts. From a security perspective, it's equivalent to military technology. My mother looked up at me, her expression cycling between pride, worry, and complete confusion. Sweetheart, how long have you been living this other life? It's not another life, Mom. It's just my life. Marcus and I don't make a big deal about his work because most of it is confidential. We live quietly because that's what we prefer. Agent Chen checked her watch. Mrs. Richardson, we need to go. The secure transport team is in position and we've identified additional surveillance vehicles in the area. James moved toward the door, his hand resting lightly on his concealed weapon. Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Henderson, your daughter will be safe. We'll have her back to you within 24 hours once we've completed our security assessment. 24 hours? My father asked. Maya's going to be gone? For 24 hours? Dad, it's okay, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure it was. This is just a precaution. But as I gathered my purse and prepared to leave with federal agents, as my family watched from the windows while a convoy of government vehicles prepared to escort me away from the home where I'd grown up, I realized that nothing about this situation was routine or okay. The comfortable boundaries between my quiet family life and Marcus's high-stakes professional world had been shattered completely. There would be no going back to simple barbecues where my greatest concern was deflecting gentle mockery about my practical car choices. As James opened the front door and I prepared to step into a level of security and protection I'd never needed before, I looked back at my family's faces. They were staring at me like they were seeing a stranger, someone they thought they knew but clearly hadn't understood at all. Maya, my mother called out as I reached the threshold, we love you. Whatever this is, whatever happens next, we love you. And as I walked toward the secure vehicle that would take me away from everything familiar, I realized that love might be the only thing that could survive the revelation of just how much they hadn't known about the life I'd been living. The secure facility looked nothing like what I had expected. Instead of sterile government offices or military bunkers, I found myself in a sleek corporate campus that could have belonged to any major technology company. Glass walls, modern furniture, and carefully curated artwork created an environment that was professional, yet oddly comforting. Marcus met me in the lobby, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. When he pulled me into his arms, I could feel the tension he'd been carrying in his shoulders, the relief of knowing I was safe, mixed with frustration over the security breach that had necessitated this dramatic extraction. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice meant only for me. I never wanted your family to find out this way. Agent Chan and James flanked us as we moved through security checkpoints that rivaled airport screening in their thoroughness. Badge scanners, metal detectors, and biometric readers confirmed our identities at multiple stages before we finally reached a conference room where several other officials waited. Mrs. Richardson, said a woman in a navy suit who introduced herself as Director Patricia Lawson from the Department of Energy's Advanced Research Division. Thank you for your cooperation during what I know has been a stressful evening. The next 3 hours involved the most thorough debriefing I had ever experienced. Every detail of my day, every interaction with family members, every moment someone might have been near the prototype was documented with meticulous precision. They asked about Derek's examination of the exterior, Ashley's rides in the vehicle, even the casual conversations about automotive technology that had taken place during dinner. Your cousin mentioned that he looked through the windows, Agent Chen noted, consulting her tablet. What specifically might he have observed? The main display screen? The dashboard layout? Maybe the seat configuration? I replied, trying to remember Derek's exact words from what felt like days ago rather than hours. Director Lawson leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Richardson, I need you to understand the significance of what your cousin saw. That display screen contains navigation systems that won't be commercially available until 2029. The dashboard integrates communication arrays that currently exist in this prototype and 2 others worldwide. 2 others worldwide. The exclusivity of what I was driving was becoming more apparent with each revelation. This wasn't just advanced technology, it was bleeding-edge research that existed in only 3 vehicles on the planet. The good news, James added, is that our investigation shows no evidence of data extraction or technical compromise. The surveillance appears to have been external observation only. What about the breach at your Chicago facility? I asked Marcus. His expression darkened. Professional industrial espionage. They accessed research files and prototype specifications, but our security systems prevented them from obtaining the actual control software. Still, they now know enough about the program to target specific vehicles. Director Lawson opened a folder containing photographs that made my stomach tighten. Images of my car taken with telephoto lenses from various locations around the city. Pictures of me entering and exiting the vehicle. Surveillance photos of my family's house taken earlier that day.
The surveillance operation was more extensive than we initially realized, she explained. They've been tracking the prototype for at least 2 weeks, documenting its movements and attempting to identify patterns in your behavior. 2 weeks. I thought back over recent errands, family visits, routine trips that had felt perfectly normal, but were apparently being cataloged by unknown parties with sophisticated surveillance equipment. Mrs. Richardson, Agent Chen said, we need to discuss some changes to your security posture going forward. Security posture. The phrase sounded like something from a spy thriller, not a conversation about my everyday life. But as they outlined the new protocols, varying my routes, checking for surveillance, reporting unusual incidents, I realized that my quiet, private existence was being permanently altered. What about my family? I asked. Are they safe? We've assigned a discrete security detail to monitor your parents' neighborhood for the next 72 hours. The surveillance on your family appears to have been incidental to tracking the vehicle, but we're taking no chances. Marcus reached for my hand across the conference table. Maya, I know this isn't what we wanted. We've tried so hard to keep work separate from our personal lives. Sometimes separation isn't possible, Director Lawson said gently. When you're involved with technology this advanced, this valuable, certain risks become unavoidable. The conversation continued for another hour, covering security protocols, communication procedures, and contingency plans that made my normal life sound like a military operation. By the time we finished, dawn was breaking through the conference room windows, painting the corporate campus in soft golden light. There's one more thing, Marcus said as we prepared to leave. The prototype program is being accelerated. We need to return your vehicle and transition you to a different car, something that won't attract this kind of attention. The thought of giving up the prototype carried an unexpected sense of loss. Over the months I had been driving it, the vehicle had become familiar, its advanced features seamlessly integrated into my daily routine. More than that, it represented a connection to Marcus's work, a tangible link to the innovative world he inhabited. What happens to it now? I asked. Secure storage while we implement additional safeguards. The technology will eventually make its way to commercial applications, but that timeline has been moved up significantly given the security concerns. As we left the facility, Marcus and I rode in a different vehicle, a conventional SUV that felt primitive after months of driving technology from the future. The contrast was jarring, like stepping backward in time, but also oddly liberating. No one would conduct surveillance operations on a standard luxury SUV. Your family must have questions, Marcus said as we drove toward home. Questions. That seemed like an understatement given the federal extraction they had witnessed, the revelation about Marcus's actual position, and the discovery that their practical niece had been living a life that warranted government security protocols. My phone had been buzzing constantly since Agent Shen had returned it to me. Text messages from Ashley, Jennifer, Derek, and my parents, each trying to process the previous evening's events in their own way. Ashley. Maya, are you okay? Mom is worried sick. Also, I keep thinking about all the times I complained about my boring job while riding in your classified military car. Derek, I can't stop thinking about how I gave you advice about car shopping. I'm never going to live this down. Jennifer, David wants to know if Marcus needs any investment partners. Half joking, maybe. My mother, sweetheart, please call when you can. Your father hasn't slept. We love you and we're proud of you, but we need to understand what your life is really like.
The messages revealed different aspects of how my family was processing the revelation. Humor, embarrassment, curiosity, and genuine concern all mixed together in their attempts to reconcile the Maya they thought they knew with the reality they had discovered. "I should probably go see them," I said, scrolling through the messages. "Are you ready for that conversation?" Marcus asked gently. It was a fair question. How do you explain to your family that your quiet, modest lifestyle was actually a carefully maintained cover for access to technology and resources that existed at the highest levels of innovation and security? How do you help them understand that your husband is not just successful, but operating at a level where his work requires federal protection? "I don't think anyone's ever ready for this conversation," I replied. Marcus pulled into our driveway, our actual home, not the secure facility we had spent the night in. The house looked exactly the same as when I had left for the family barbecue, but everything felt different. The comfortable separation between our private life and Marcus's professional world had been shattered, and there was no way to rebuild those boundaries. "Maya," Marcus said as we sat in the driveway, "I want you to know that if you want to step back from all of this, we can make that happen. I can arrange for additional security layers that would allow you to live more normally." The offer was generous and sincere, but as I considered it, I realized that normal was no longer what I wanted. The previous evening had been jarring and stressful, but it had also been oddly liberating. For the first time in years, I didn't have to carefully moderate my responses to family questions about Marcus's work or maintain vague answers about our lifestyle. "I don't want to step back," I said, "but I think we need to find a better way to handle the family situation." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What do you have in mind?" "Honesty," I said simply. "Not about classified details or specific technologies, but about the general reality of our lives. They're smart people. They can handle knowing that your work is important and sometimes complicated without needing to know exactly what you do." As we walked toward our front door, I felt a strange sense of resolution settling over me. The careful compartmentation that had defined my relationship with my family was ending. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The awkward questions, the gentle mockery, the well-meaning advice about lifestyle choices, all of it had been based on fundamental misunderstandings about who I was and what my life actually looked like. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Marcus said as we entered the house. "Director Lawson wants to offer you a consulting position with the research team."
The suggestion caught me off guard. What kind of consulting? User experience feedback on prototype technologies. You've been driving advanced systems for months, living with them in real-world conditions. Your insights could be valuable for the next generation of development. A consulting position would formalize my involvement in Marcus's world rather than keeping me at arm's length from it. It would mean security clearances, confidentiality agreements, and a level of professional integration that would permanently alter how we navigated the boundary between work and personal life. I'd be an actual part of the company rather than just the CEO's wife who happens to drive the prototype. You'd be a subject matter expert whose perspective helps shape how advanced technology integrates into everyday life, Marcus replied. Your family's reaction last night actually highlighted something important. We've been so focused on the technical capabilities that we haven't fully considered how these innovations will be perceived and adopted by regular people. Regular people. The phrase made me smile, given that my regular person perspective had just required federal security extraction and a night in a classified facility. My phone buzzed again with another text from my mother. "Maya, your father just realized that when you said Marcus traveled for work, you probably meant he travels to classified government facilities. We're going to need a much longer conversation than we originally thought." As I read the message, I realized that my family's journey of understanding was just beginning. The revelation about the prototype had been shocking, but it was only the tip of an iceberg that included Marcus's actual position, the nature of his company's work, and the level of security and sophistication that defined our daily lives. "I think," I told Marcus, "that it's time for a very honest family dinner." 3 weeks later, I stood in the gleaming lobby of the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago, watching as 2 men in expensive suits were led past in handcuffs. Their corporate espionage operation had unraveled quickly once federal investigators began pulling threads.
revealing a sophisticated network that had been targeting multiple defense contractors across the Midwest. Marcus stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder as we watched the culmination of an investigation that had begun with surveillance photos of my car and ended with the exposure of industrial espionage operations worth millions of dollars. The lead prosecutor says they'll likely plead guilty. The evidence is overwhelming, and our cooperation helped them build cases against 3 other companies involved in the network. Director Lawson joined our small group, carrying a briefcase that I suspected contained the final reports on the security investigation. Mrs. Richardson, your family's cooperation during the investigation was invaluable. The details they provided about the suspicious behavior they witnessed helped us establish timelines and confirm surveillance activities. My family's cooperation. The phrase carried weight beyond its simple meaning, representing weeks of patient interviews, careful questioning, and the gradual revelation of just how extensively our lives had been monitored by professional intelligence operatives. What happens now? I asked. Now we implement the enhanced security protocols we discussed. And you start your new position on Monday. My new position. 3 weeks of consideration had led to my acceptance of the consulting role with Apex Innovations, a decision that would formalize my involvement in Marcus's world while giving me professional identity beyond being the CEO's wife who drives the prototype. My phone buzzed with another text from Derek. Maya, just saw the news report about the arrests. Does this mean the spy thriller portion of our family history is officially over? The news coverage had been extensive but carefully managed, focusing on the corporate espionage charges without revealing specific details about the technology that had been targeted. My family had watched the morning broadcasts with fascination, seeing federal officials discuss the case without mentioning the Henderson family barbecue that had inadvertently become part of a national security investigation. There's one more thing, Director Lawson said, her expression carrying a hint of something that might have been amusement. The prototype you are driving has been approved for limited field testing with selected civilian users. If you're interested, we'd like you to continue providing real-world feedback. Continue driving the prototype. The offer was unexpected and oddly touching, representing not just access to advanced technology, but acknowledgement that my perspective had value beyond my connection to Marcus. With enhanced security measures, of course, Agent Chen added quickly. Different protocols, varied routes, and a support system that ensures this kind of surveillance can't happen again. As we left the courthouse, Marcus and I drove toward my parents' house in a convoy that would have seemed excessive 3 weeks earlier, but now felt like prudent caution. The enhanced security protocols meant that simple family visits required coordination and planning, but my family had adapted with surprising grace. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked, as we turned into the familiar neighborhood where I had grown up. "About dinner with my family? I think we're past the point where anything can surprise them." Till I wasn't entirely sure that was true. The past 3 weeks had involved a series of increasingly honest conversations with my family, each revealing new layers of complexity in our lives that they hadn't previously understood. The gentle mockery and well-meaning advice had been replaced by genuine curiosity and occasionally awe at the scope of what Marcus's company actually accomplished. We pulled into the driveway where this entire situation had begun, parking next to Derek's Porsche, which somehow looked smaller and less impressive than I remembered. The prototype sat behind us, its quiet presence no longer a source of family confusion, but a symbol of technology and innovation that commanded respect.
Ashley met us at the front door, her expression bright with excitement. "Maya! Perfect timing! Derek just finished explaining to Mom and Dad why he's never giving anyone car advice again." The living room had been transformed into what appeared to be a celebration. Balloons, a banner reading, "Congratulations on your new job," and a cake that my mother had clearly spent considerable time perfecting. My family's ability to adapt extraordinary situations into occasions for celebration was one of their most endearing qualities. "Sweetheart," my mother said, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than usual, "we're so proud of you. Starting a new career, contributing to important research, being part of something that matters."
My father approached Marcus with the kind of respectful handshake that suggested their relationship had evolved significantly over the past 3 weeks. Marcus, I owe you an apology. When Maya said you worked in computers, I pictured someone fixing office printers, not someone developing technology for the federal government. The distinction is easy to miss, Marcus replied diplomatically, though I caught the hint of humor in his voice. Uncle Bill emerged from the kitchen carrying a beer and wearing an expression of grudging admiration. Maya, I have to admit, when those federal agents showed up at our barbecue, I thought you'd gotten yourself into trouble. Turns out you'd gotten yourself into something pretty impressive instead. Jennifer appeared with a bottle of wine, her real estate agent's instincts apparently satisfied by the resolution of what she now referred to as the family spy incident. David wants to know if Apex Innovations ever needs property for new facilities. He's suddenly very interested in commercial real estate for technology companies. The conversation flowed with an ease that had been missing from family gatherings for years. Without the need to deflect questions about Marcus's work or maintain vague responses about our lifestyle, I found myself actually enjoying the discussion. My family's genuine interest in understanding our world, rather than making assumptions about it, created space for honest communication that felt refreshing. Derek appeared from the backyard, wiping his hands on a towel with an expression of chagrin. Maya, I spent the afternoon detailing my Porsche, and all I could think about was how I gave you advice about car maintenance while you were driving a $12 million prototype. I may never recover from the embarrassment. The Porsche is a beautiful car, I said diplomatically. It's a nice car, Derek replied. Your car is apparently a glimpse into the automotive future that most people won't see for another decade. Ashley settled into her favorite chair with a glass of wine, her expression thoughtful. Maya, can I ask you something? When we were giving you all that advice about image and success and making statements with your car choices, did you want to tell us the truth? The question was more perceptive than I had expected. Sometimes, I admitted, but it was easier to let you think what you thought than to try to explain something I couldn't really talk about. That must have been frustrating, my mother observed, listening to us give you advice about things we completely misunderstood. It was, I said honestly, but it was also kind of sweet that you cared enough to give advice, even if it was based on wrong assumptions. Uncle Bill raised his beer in a toast to Maya, who apparently mastered the art of living an extraordinary life while letting her family think she was just being practical. As we raised our glasses, I felt a sense of closure settling over the past 3 weeks of revelation and adjustment. The federal investigation was complete, the security threats had been neutralized, and my family had successfully navigated the transition from gentle mockery to genuine respect for choices they finally understood. There's something else, Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Since Maya's consulting work will involve regular access to prototype vehicles, we thought it might be time for a more permanent arrangement. He handed me a key fob that looked identical to the one I had been using, but with a small engraved plate that read, M. Richardson, Senior Consultant, User Experience Division. Your own prototype? Derek asked, his voice carrying a note of awe. My own prototype, I confirmed, feeling a sense of professional pride that went beyond the technology itself. Jennifer leaned forward with interest. Does this mean you'll be driving classified vehicles to family dinners from now on? It means, Marcus replied, that Maya will be contributing to research that helps determine how advanced technology integrates into everyday life. Her insights from months of real-world use have already influenced the next generation of development. My father nodded approvingly. So, our Maya is going to help design the future of transportation? Something like that, I said, though the scope of the work extended far beyond automotive applications into areas I still couldn't discuss in detail. As the evening progressed, I found myself observing my family with new appreciation. Their ability to process extraordinary information, adapt to dramatically changed circumstances, and maintain their essential warmth and humor despite federal investigations and security protocols spoke to a resilience I hadn't fully recognized before. Derek cornered me near the dessert table, his expression unusually serious. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. When I was telling you about the importance of status symbols, about choosing cars that make statements about success, were you laughing at me inside? The question deserved an honest answer. I wasn't laughing at you, Derek, but I was thinking about how different our definitions of success had become. Different how? You measure success by how others perceive your choices. For Marcus and me, success is measured by contributing to innovations that might change how the world works, even if no one knows we're involved. That's actually pretty profound, and probably more satisfying than worrying about what people think of your car. Usually, I agreed, though having federal agents extract you from family barbecues does add a certain level of stress to the equation.
As the evening wound down, my family gathered around the prototype for what had become a ritual examination. But this time, instead of dismissive comments about practical choices and resale values, they approached it with respect due to technology that represented years of research and millions of dollars in development. "It still looks like a regular car," Ashley observed. "That's probably the point, right? All that advanced technology hidden in something that doesn't draw attention?" "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "The most sophisticated innovations are often the ones that integrate seamlessly into normal life." Uncle Bill walked slowly around the vehicle, his expression thoughtful. "Maya, I have to admit there's something satisfying about knowing that when we were giving you advice about practical choices, you were already making choices more advanced than anything we could have imagined." As Marcus and I prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Sweetheart, I want you to know that we understand now why you and Marcus live quietly, why you don't make a big show of your success. There's wisdom in that approach." "Thanks, Mom. But I also want you to know that we're proud of you, not just for the new job or the important work, but for handling all of this with such grace. Most people would have been tempted to show off, to prove us wrong about our assumptions. You just let us figure it out naturally." As we drove home in the prototype, Marcus reached over and took my hand. "How do you feel about everything that's happened?" I considered the question as we passed through the familiar neighborhoods of my childhood, now under discreet federal protection that was invisible but reassuring. "I feel like I can finally be honest about who I am and what our life is really like. That's worth more than all the advanced technology in the world. Even if it means federal investigations and security protocols?" "Even then," I said, looking at the key fob with my name engraved on it. "Besides, someone has to help design the future. It might as well be someone who knows how to handle family barbecues that turn into national security incidents." 6 months later, I stood before a conference room filled with automotive engineers, federal researchers, and technology executives, presenting findings from my first comprehensive report as senior consultant for user experience. The data on my screen represented thousands of miles of real-world testing, countless hours of analysis, and insights that could only come from someone who had lived with advanced technology as a normal part of daily life. The most significant finding, I told the assembled experts, is that user adoption of advanced automotive technology depends less on technical capabilities and more on seamless integration with existing behavioral patterns. In the back of the room, Marcus watched with visible pride as I outlined recommendations that would influence the next generation of vehicle development. The shy woman who had once deflected family questions about her car choices had evolved into someone comfortable commanding the attention of some of the most sophisticated technical minds in the country. My presentation concluded with a video montage that had become legendary within Apex Innovations, security camera footage from my family's barbecue showing the exact moment when federal agents arrived to extract a cheap electric car that turned out to be worth more than most people's houses. The footage had been carefully edited to remove classified details, but it perfectly illustrated the gap between perception and reality that defined much of my research. The Henderson family barbecue incident, as it was now officially known in company documentation, had become a case study in assumptions, expectations, and the importance of designing technology that didn't alienate the very people it was meant to serve.
After the meeting, I walked through the Apex Innovations campus with newfound confidence. The sterile corporate environment that had once intimidated me now felt familiar, comfortable. My security badge bore the title Senior Consultant and provided access to research facilities that were among the most advanced in the world. Maya, called Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the head of the Automotive Development Division, excellent presentation today. The integration data you collected will directly influence our commercial rollout strategy. Commercial rollout. The prototype technology I had been driving in secret was finally approaching public availability, though in carefully controlled stages that would take years to complete. My role had expanded from simply providing feedback to helping shape how revolutionary technology would be introduced to a world that wasn't always ready for revolution. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Saw the news about Apex Innovations announcing their new vehicle line. Are you finally allowed to brag about being ahead of the curve? The public announcement had been carefully orchestrated, revealing just enough about the company's capabilities to generate excitement without compromising ongoing classified research. For the first time in years, Marcus and I could discuss his work openly, within carefully defined boundaries. I drove home in my current prototype, the fourth-generation model that made my original vehicle seem primitive by comparison. The technology had evolved rapidly, incorporating lessons learned from real-world testing and user feedback that included my own detailed reports on everything from seat comfort during long drives to the intuitive design of control interfaces. The house Marcus and I shared had also evolved. What had once been a carefully maintained separation between personal and professional life had given way to a home office where classified research met family photos, where cutting-edge technology coexisted with the comfortable domesticity of a couple building a life together. "How did the presentation go?" Marcus asked as I entered the kitchen, where he was preparing dinner with the focused attention he brought to everything he did. "Dr. Warren says my integration data will influence the commercial rollout," I replied, still feeling the satisfaction of professional recognition earned through genuine expertise rather than spousal connections. "That's incredible, Maya. 6 months ago, you were worried about accepting the consulting position, and now you're shaping product development for technology that will be in millions of vehicles."
The transformation had been gradual but profound. The woman who had once sat quietly at family gatherings, deflecting questions and maintaining careful privacy, had discovered that she actually enjoyed discussing complex problems with brilliant people, that her perspective had value beyond her connection to the CEO. My phone rang with a call from my mother, part of a weekly routine that had developed since the federal investigation concluded. "Maya, sweetheart, your father just saw the Apex Innovations announcement on the financial news. He's very proud, though he still doesn't completely understand what you do. I help design vehicles that won't be available to the public for several years," I explained, using the simplified description that had become my standard response to family inquiries. "And these vehicles are based on technology you've been testing by driving them to our barbecues?" "Something like that." My mother's laugh carried genuine warmth and amazement. "Maya, do you realize that our family dinners have been informal test drives for the future of transportation?" The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family had been gently mocking my practical car choices, they had actually been witnessing the development of automotive technology that would eventually transform how the world thought about vehicles. "Mom, can I ask you something? When you look back at all those family gatherings where you gave me advice about success and image, do you wish you had known the truth?" There was a thoughtful pause before she answered. "Honestly, I think the advice was still valid, just not in the way we intended. You were projecting success, just not the kind we recognized. You were making smart choices. We just didn't understand how smart they were. And now? Now I realize that the most sophisticated success is often the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. You and Marcus were building something extraordinary while maintaining the humility to let your family think you were just being practical." That evening, Marcus and I attended a dinner party hosted by Dr. Warren.
part of a growing social circle that included researchers, entrepreneurs, and federal officials who worked at the intersection of technology and national security. The conversations ranged from quantum computing to international trade policy, from automotive design to energy infrastructure. Maya, said Dr. James Peterson, a senior researcher from the Department of Energy, I understand you're the family member who inspired the Henderson Protocol. The Henderson Protocol, a set of guidelines for introducing advanced technology to civilian users without creating security vulnerabilities or social disruption, named after my family's inadvertent involvement in a federal investigation, had become standard procedure for managing the transition from classified research to commercial applications. I'm not sure inspired is the right word, I replied. My family just happened to demonstrate how little most people understand about the technology they encounter every day. That's exactly the point, Dr. Peterson continued. Your experience showed us that even intelligent, well-meaning people can completely misinterpret what they're seeing when it comes to advanced technology. That insight is now influencing how we approach public education and market preparation. Later that evening, as Marcus and I drove home through the city streets, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from quiet family gatherings to policy discussions with federal researchers. The transformation hadn't just been about accepting a new job or gaining security clearance. It had been about recognizing that my perspective had value, that the intersection between advanced technology and normal life required someone who understood both worlds. Maya, said Marcus as we stopped at a traffic light, do you remember what you said the night after the barbecue incident about wanting to find a better way to handle the family situation? I said I wanted honesty instead of careful separation. Do you think we achieved that? I considered the question as we resumed driving. My family now understood, within appropriate boundaries, the nature of our work and the significance of the technology we developed. They no longer offered gentle advice about practical car choices or worried about our future financial security. But more importantly, they had learned to see past surface appearances to recognize value in forms they hadn't previously understood. We achieved something better than honesty, I said finally. We achieved mutual respect based on understanding rather than assumptions. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Maya, just wanted you to know that I've stopped giving anyone advice about cars. Ever. My new policy is to assume that everyone knows something I don't. The message made me smile, representing a humility that the entire family had developed through their exposure to just how much they hadn't understood about technology, success, and the many ways people could contribute to important work without making public displays of their achievements. The next morning, I arrived at my office to find a package on my desk. A framed photograph of my family standing around the prototype at last weekend's barbecue, all of them smiling with genuine pride and affection. A note from Ashley was attached. For the woman who taught us that the most impressive achievements are often the ones that look perfectly ordinary.
As I placed the photograph on my desk, next to technical manuals and classified research reports, I realized that the integration was complete. The careful boundaries between personal and professional life hadn't been eliminated. They had been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and shared understanding of what really mattered. Dr. Warren appeared in my doorway, carrying a folder that I recognized as containing new prototype specifications. Maya, we have a new vehicle ready for civilian testing. Are you interested in being our primary user experience consultant? What makes this one different? I asked. It's designed specifically for family use, larger interior, enhanced safety features, technology interfaces that accommodate multiple users with different comfort levels. She smiled. We're calling it the Henderson Family Edition. The Henderson Family Edition. Technology designed with input from people who had learned to look past assumptions and recognize value in unexpected forms. A vehicle that would eventually help other families navigate the transition from conventional transportation to the automotive future that was arriving faster than most people realized.
I'd be honored, I said, accepting the folder that contained specifications for technology that would once again push the boundaries of what was possible while appearing perfectly normal to casual observers. As I reviewed the technical documents, I thought about the journey that had brought me from family barbecues where I deflected gentle mockery to corporate boardrooms where my insights influenced multi-million-dollar development decisions. The transformation hadn't been about changing who I was. It had been about recognizing who I had always been and finding the courage to let that person contribute to something larger than herself. The prototype keys arrived that afternoon, sleek and sophisticated, but unremarkable to anyone who didn't understand their significance. As I prepared to take the new vehicle home, I realized that I was looking forward to the next family gathering, not because I wanted to show off or prove anything, but because I genuinely enjoyed sharing my world with people who had learned to appreciate the complexity and wonder of technology that was reshaping their future. The woman who had once sat quietly while her family offered advice about practical car choices had become someone who helped design the vehicles their children would drive, the technology that would define transportation for the next generation. And the family that had once gently mocked her modest choices had become her strongest supporters, proudly telling friends and neighbors about their daughter who worked with classified automotive technology for the federal government. Sometimes the greatest transformations are the ones that help us become more fully ourselves rather than changing us into someone else entirely. And sometimes the most sophisticated technology is the kind that enhances normal life rather than replacing it with something alien and intimidating. As I drove home in the latest prototype, I smiled at the thought of next weekend's family gathering, where my practical car choice would once again be the subject of discussion. Not mockery this time, but genuine curiosity about the future I was helping to create, one family gathering at a time. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.